Hello, everybody. I'm Love Coach Scott Catamas, and welcome to Straight Talk. It is May 28th, 2021, and I want to welcome any of you who are watching live. And if you're watching live, we would love to hear some of your thoughts, comments, and questions, specifically questions on tonight's topic. And again, we're continuing on with our theme of getting tools, tips, and practices for managing some of the hardest stuff in life. Alcoholism, addiction, depression, even suicidal fantasies. And so we've got three extraordinary gentlemen, all who work with wholehearted.org. If you saw our previous show, you know a little bit about it, but we're going to go deeper into what Wholehearted is all about. We're going to learn more about TJ and his wonderful work in conscious recovery. And to kind of get us going, I'm going to put the spotlight on my partner here. This is Trish. Trish, how have these issues impacted you? And I know that you have a strong feeling about why we're doing this show 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah. Well, mental health, aka the chemistry that runs through your brain, is some of the most important health that we can focus on, in my opinion. It is the focus of self-love. Scott, and maybe you guys don't know, but I run a show every Thursday morning called the Self-Love Show. And it's not just about, bubble baths and, face scrubbies, but really looking at the things that create the patterning in our life. And that's what, in my opinion, is what addiction is that it's, you become addicted to either whatever chemical, could be a beer, or it could be, the conversation, a negative conversation. It could be self-depreciating opinions. It could be owning the story that someone didn't love you, or it could be a severe chemical that you're running through your body. And it becomes a neurochemical, neural pathway in your brain. So you're automatically sort of going towards that. Our bodies are constantly looking for homeostasis, for that balance. And I hope that if I say anything incorrectly, that these beautiful fellas will totally, work this back around. But I think it's really important to talk about the hard stuff. This is called Straight Talk. And Scott, that what's really important to me is to really talk about the things that nobody wants to talk about. Because this is how we normalize the conversation. This is how we get help when nobody wants to talk about heartbreak or nobody wants to talk about drug addiction because it's so hush-hush, it's still so taboo, and that's not how things change. Things change when we converse, when we get really honest, when we really share, because there's so many tools out there, there's so much information out there, and what is real and what will you. And so that's why we have amazing people come in. That's why we have TJ Woodward and AJ Fox and Roland. This is important conversation. So I invite all of our viewers and our listeners to really give us your questions about addiction. Give us your questions and share your experiences so that we can interact.
Beautiful. And I've kind of put it on gallery view. We're going to meet all of these gentlemen. AJ is the creator, the executive director and producer, and man who makes wholehearted.org happen. But you know what? He's a little on the shy side, to be honest. So I'm going to actually start with TJ and ask TJ to tell us how you got introduced to Wholehearted and what Wholehearted has meant to you and what you discovered about it. And then we'll give AJ a chance to warm up a little bit.
Well, that's perfect. So I'm assuming you're saying that I'm not shy, Scott. Is that the implication here? Because it's true that I am not. Absolutely.
TJ, I will vote for you when you run for president.
Oh yeah, no, too many skeletons in my closet for that. So I met AJ several years ago when I was presenting at a conference, and the immediate conversation, there was a synchronicity, and we were talking about how to make mental health, the conversation around mental health, well-being, addiction recovery, more available to more people. And we were talking about how, a platform like TED Talk is great. You get inspired for 12 minutes or however many minutes it is. But AJ's vision, which I really love, is not just to have talks, because wholehearted.org has some amazing talks, but for the people that really want to go deeper, that want to really actually transform their lives. And so he's brought together some phenomenal thought leaders. We've got Dr. Gabor Mate, Brene Brown, Marianne Williamson, this amazing person named Roland Williams is on the platform. I have the honor of being on it. And it really is a place where someone can go if they really just want to be uplifted, if they want to work on, as Trish said, some of the more difficult conversations, to look at how we can actually heal. So I think in the simplest form, I would say it is a platform for healing.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to, go ahead and go to the website for Wholehearted for a moment. As we take a look at it, you can kind of share with us. Here we go. There it is. And if anybody doesn't know Gabor Mate, Trisha, tell us a little bit about him, since he's obviously such a big part of Wholehearted.
Well, I'm going to defer that to AJ because he has worked with him for years, but I'm going to say my personal experience of him. I think Dr. Gabor Mate is a person that's speaking in such a profoundly deep and transformational way about how we can actually address some of the systemic issues that happen in culture. That's one of the things I love about him. He's a doctor, so he comes from this beautiful point of view where he brings in a lot of different components, including the physical. But one of the things I love about him is that he speaks so from his heart. He talks a lot about systemic and generational issues, and a lot about how we heal trauma, which is really, I was going to say trauma is dear to my heart, but that is really true, because in my experience, just about 100% of the time, one of the underlying root causes of addiction is trauma. And he's someone who speaks to it in such a beautiful and profound way. And I've just always loved listening to him.
Wow, thank you.
So how I know Gabor Mate is that he's big into trauma, but he's also into, he's really into childhood, like how the childhood creates the trauma and how it creates the system that we live in our adulthood. He's also a compassionate communication. Like that's mostly what he's what's it called? Oh, compassionate inquiry is his whole platform. And I know, Scott, you'd probably really love Gabor Mate because he really is really there in that place of understanding humans as human and loving them there.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that's a perfect opportunity for us to put the spotlight on AJ. AJ, tell us about Gabor, but also tell us then about Wholehearted. And I think the two kind of come together. Your work with Gabor led to your starting Wholehearted. So tell us the story.
Well, okay. So there are a lot of other people involved that I'd like to go back and spotlight, but Gabor is the most visible. Been working with Gabor for about, I met him like almost 10 years ago, and I'd gone to a bunch of his trainings, read all his books, and had conversations with him about, your work is amazing. I can't wait to see your first course or your first program. Year after year would go by, and there were a lot of individuals that worked with him to try and create something. But it's really difficult. It's really expensive. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of staff to put programs together. And so about almost 5 years ago, we finally just went to him and said, we're tired of waiting and the world needs to hear what you have to say. We'll do it. And at that point, I already had like the idea of Wholehearted in my head. But he was like the first person that we were really able to get behind. And so we brought him to Sacramento, California, and we did a 3-day, all-day workshop with hundreds of guests, and we produced a really high-quality set of programs. And then we worked on post-production for almost 2 years and built the online platform, wholehearted.org, which is a video-driven online resource that focuses on talks, video courses, and training programs. A lot of our content is free, and some of it we sell. And fortunately, because of Gabor's incredible work and the support of TJ and Mark Lundholm, people like Roland Williams, the launch of the website was incredibly successful. And we now have over 100,000 people that are members, and we're growing by a couple thousand people every day.
Wow.
And so what I would like to say about Gabor is he is one of the most compassionate people I have ever met in my life. And he's got an energy and a presence around him where he almost always says something unexpected and enlightened, but it is wrapped in a very human and I would say flawed in an affectionate way. He embraces humanity. He embraces his own trauma, his own issues. He's very open about it. And he is one of the safest and most gentle people I've ever met. And he's been incredibly generous with his time and with his knowledge and with his wisdom. And he really doesn't want or ask anything of anybody. He kind of just gives. And I think that's also why he's so popular and successful. He's at a point in his life where he's privileged enough to be able to give as much as he does. And he's really dedicated to that. The programs we have with him on wholehearted.org are the most popular programs that he has in existence. There's many, many people that have engaged in the programs, and we've been fortunate enough to offer unlimited scholarships to them for anyone who needs it. Going back to how TJ and I met, one of the things that really stood out to me about TJ was, first, he had a lot of enthusiasm, right? He's got this thing, he's got conscious recovery, and he knows it makes a difference because he's helped so many people with it. And I met him at a conference, he handed me his books, and we kept in touch. And I saw him speak, and when I saw him speak, I knew that his work is the practical place where Gabor leaves off. So Gabor is excellent about talking about trauma and what's going on in the world. And he does have his compassion inquiry technique, which helps you. Well, he uses and he trains people on how to use that to find out what's underneath the pain or the adaptation or the behavior that people adapt to the traumas they have in childhood. But he's not like a how-to person necessarily. So the courses we have with him are, very expansive and detailed, and they're practical. But what's really wonderful is the conscious recovery programs that we have with TJ. Those are practical experiences. They're very much participatory that walk you through how to actually craft your own recovery and make a journey. Because what recovery in my mind has always meant, which has always appealed to me about TJ, is what are you recovering? You're recovering yourself. And we have a talk with TJ. It's a free talk on Wholehearted. It's called The Return to Wholeness. And he says, you're born whole and perfect. The journey of recovery, the journey of building a quality life, a recovery that you define as yours through your own compassion and without judgment, is about returning to who you were before what he would call a brilliant strategies or an adaptation or coping mechanism. And so his work in conscious recovery, I saw after doing so much work with Gabor, as this is the way that individuals that need assistance can really put their recovery into practice. And it's so trauma informed, and it's so open and gentle, but really supportive. And TJ has spent just so many hours in the studio with us creating, 20 hours of video or something that you are like gently guided through every single step and every single exercise. So I would say, as far as programs we've created, it is the most comprehensive program that I've been involved with. I'm incredibly honored to be involved with it. And I'm really excited that people are able to come on a show like this and learn about it. Also, to include Roland, we're currently working with Roland right now, and Roland's workbooks are equally as detailed and impactful and enlightening. And just in reviewing them, I have learned so much about areas where I was maybe blind or needed to become more aware. And as someone who's produced over 100 programs, to continue being able to learn from these brilliant people is an honor. So that's what I would really have to say about wholehearted, how we met, what we're working on. And I can answer more questions about Gabor because everyone has questions about him. He really is a brilliant man. And I would say that I would bet that if he was on this program, he would also encourage you to take a look at these other individuals because they've also dedicated their life to this work.
Well, we're going to, hear at length from Roland and from TJ. So this will be kind of the last little bit about Gabor. If people go to your website, wholehearted.org, I know that you're really putting a lot of attention and focus on the 8-episode course, Healing Trauma and Addiction. So tell us just a little bit about that for anybody that has gotten intrigued, and what would they get out of taking this particular course? And then we'll get to TJ and Roland.
Absolutely. Okay, so Healing Trauma and Addiction is one of our flagship programs. It's 8 episodes long. It's a total of about 6.5 hours when you watch the entire program. When you sign up for the program, you own it. It is yours for life. There's not a limited time window. You can watch it anytime, as many times as you want. It's yours. It's called Healing Trauma and Addiction because that's really what it focuses on. It's Gabor's definition of addiction, which is any behavior that one continues to use to numb from pain or an adaptation despite negative consequences, and they're unable to stop. So it can be workaholism, hoarding, eating disorders, or drug and alcohol addiction. It's very expansive. It's very much about trauma, and it really helps people look at why they behave the way they behave and how to have compassion for yourself and others. He takes the approach of discussing this as a disorder in the entire family. So, or whoever you define as your family. So it's not specific to the person who is, quote, the addict or just the family. He integrates all pieces of this. It's incredibly detailed. Every sentence he says is something that's fairly profound. And so a lot of people watch and pause. And we have many people that have commented that they've had to watch the program multiple times. And each time they watch it, they take something new away, because when you spend 6.5 hours with someone like Gabor, it's almost impossible for you not to grow as a person and to heal somewhat. And so when you see the material again, you perceive it completely differently and you process it differently. You can actually feel your growth as you review the program again. The program was a pleasure to put together. It was like 2.5 years of work. I worked very closely with Gabor putting it together. There's almost 70 pages of written material that our team put together that goes along with it. And we are continually updating it with more material as time goes on.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for the incredible work that you're doing.
Sure.
I'm going to go to gallery view because I want to share kind of a commonality between the work that Trisha and I do with Love Coach Academy, and my understanding of your work, especially TJ's. And I want to vulnerably share that I actually met TJ. I was looking for someone to do some coaching. I was going through a hard time. I was drinking too much. And TJ was referred to me. And it was perfect because I really appreciate his approach, that it's not about, I had a lot of trigger about the idea of being perceived as, a drinker or an alcoholic, which I didn't believe that I was. But I definitely was drinking too much, and it was an issue, and I needed to deal with it. And I love TJ's whole focus of bringing it back into wholeness. And it is similar to something that Trisha and I teach. When people ask us, well, what's the difference between love coaching and traditional therapy? Our standard response is that in traditional therapy, people are diagnosed and evaluated, and God bless, therapists spend many years learning how to diagnose and evaluate what's wrong with somebody. In Love Coach Academy, we don't think there's anything wrong with anyone. We just recognize that life is freaking hard. Life is difficult. Life is challenging. And we adopt coping strategies, as TJ calls them, brilliant strategies, that initially really help us to deal with life or to have more fun. But then those strategies become compulsions or addictions, and they get out of balance, like most anything juicy in life, right? So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And with that, Trisha, anything you want to add about that before I turn it over to TJ? No? Okay. So with that, I am going to put the spotlight on my friend and my coach, and someone I have tremendous respect for, TJ.
Oh, thank you so much, Scott. And I'm just so deeply honored to be here. Roland and I have worked together for years, and we are really connected. And, all of you, I'm just so incredibly grateful to be here and to be able to share about conscious recovery and really how we are shifting into a new way, in my experience, a new paradigm of how we look at addiction. And Scott, you said it so well. Those of us who have worked in mental health or addiction work for any time have realized that it's really so much of it is the Western medical model, which is asking what is wrong and how do I help you fix it, right? And the what is wrong is a symptom, and the symptom tends to be looked at as the problem. And so whether we're talking about physical, intellectual, emotional, or spiritual, the holistic approach is not looking at what is the problem and how do we get rid of it. It's looking at what the root of that issue is. And I think that the number one thing out of the gate that I want to share is that I've identified shame as one of the root causes of addiction. And a lot of the way that the approach is, looking backward, Roland and I, we've been around for a while. We've been around this world since 1986, right, Roland? And there was a lot of, I would say, unconscious shame that happened in the way people were treated. And I want to be really clear, I don't mean it was conscious. I think that whether we're talking about some of the support groups or a clinician or a therapist that was trained, there tended to be what's wrong here, or maybe even I have the answers for you. But what happens is, and I like to go a little deeper with it and talk about the quantum field, and that is what I'm looking for. Actually, there's a higher possibility or probability that we will discover it. And so we're multidimensional beings, and conscious recovery, Scott already spoke to this, but at the root of it, we're recognizing that, as AJ said, we come into this world as whole and perfect beings. I would say whole and perfect spiritual beings. And then life happens. We could use another word, right? But life happens, and we start to believe fundamental lies about ourselves, and we develop core false beliefs. But it's much more than a belief. Shame is a frequency, right? It's a way of being. It's in the body, it's in the mind, it's in our hearts, and it's in our spirit. And we end up believing these lies about ourselves, and then we end up creating our life based on that. And gosh, when I even saying that, I'm like, of course we drink and use and sex and shop and all the things that we do to not feel that, right? And so, similar to Gabor, I like very simple, and this, maybe it's overly simplistic, but addiction in its simplest form is looking for something or someone, some behavior outside of ourselves to try to manage something that feels out of alignment within. And in that way, we can look at the brilliance that it once was, right? Not even that it was a coping mechanism, but that it was a brilliant strategy. And I actually, I'll let other people talk, but what I want to, I guess, close with for now is I am interested in really changing the entire paradigm of how we look at people and how we view people and how we treat people. And I'm using treat with air quotes because I'm interested in us no longer calling it addiction treatment or treatment centers, but we move into actually healing, addiction healing centers. And even addiction healing isn't 100%. It's really about creating a space for us to return to our wholeness. And that I really know that we can heal the underlying root causes. That the mind might want to say, oh, is he saying I can drink again? Not what I'm saying, but what I am saying is I like to ask the question, what gets created when? So what gets created when we are told we have a chemical imbalance or we have something organically wrong with us, and we don't even know if that's true. That's just what we've been passed along. We've been told that addiction is a chronic lifelong illness that cannot be cured, only treated. Not to debate that, but to look at what it creates. What does it create when I believe that? What does it create when we tell our clients that? What does it create when we believe that about our loved ones? Even believing it. I had the opportunity this week to speak to a group of mothers, and the number one thing that it's like giving them permission to not look for what's wrong with their child and then go into blame about who's at fault and how did it get created. So if we can shift from blame to curiosity, that alone will have a profound shift, create a profound shift. Thank you, Scott.
Well, thank you. And, of course, being that you're talking about conscious recovery, and our audience is the Global Peace Trust. So there is a spirituality, a non-denominational spirituality that's beautifully woven into your teaching and your approach. And I agree. I think shame is the great human epidemic.
Yeah.
And I always love that delineation that guilt is when we feel bad about something we did.
Mm-hmm.
Shame is when we feel bad about who we are.
Right.
And we all have shame around something. And it is important to, and coming out of a worldview where people were consistently shamed. 3 of the 5 world's great religions are very much built around shame.
Yes.
I remember being a little boy walking into the church and seeing this guy hanging on a cross in agony and wondering why we were worshiping him. And then, he died for my sins. Wow, I didn't even know I was that bad, that this beautiful man that we worship died because I'm a bad boy. It made no sense to me. Still doesn't make any sense to me, honestly. So alleviating shame is something that, if we alleviated shame in this world, I really believe 95% of our problems would evaporate, would dissipate.
Well, that's exactly right, because if you look at what's happening in our culture in the last 14 or 15 months, because the counterpart to shame is blame, right? And so if I haven't healed my shame, then it gets externalized and I go into blame, and blame is one of the lowest vibrations.
Right.
And we see a lot of it in our culture right now. And perhaps it's always existed. It seems pronounced right now. And I look at it as an invitation. It's an invitation for us to heal. And, I know other people are going to talk, but maybe later we can talk about how you actually heal shame, because it's really, really different than the way you work with guilt. So I love the distinction, and maybe we can talk more about that later. But, this healing is at hand. Let's put it that way.
TJ, I want to bring Roland up. And rather than me reading, and then he went to this college and he did this, that, and the other thing, I would love for you to introduce Roland for us, because you've worked with him and you have a more personal connection.
It's so interesting, Roland. I get the privilege of introducing Roland a lot, and I don't know what that is, other than I'm one of the luckiest guys ever, because I get to just talk about this incredible person. You talked about enthusiasm, and that's something that I can say about Roland. It could be that we're both Leos, right? It could be that, but Roland is someone who I would describe as a bigger than life, visionary person on planet Earth. And when we met, actually, I heard you speak a couple of times, but when we actually had an opportunity to meet, there was a synchronicity of energy. And I was actually applying for a job, and Roland, with his humor, was like, "No, I don't think this job is right for you." So I think there's something bigger here. And so the word that comes to mind is visionary, and the other word is pioneer. He's someone who has helped start treatment programs. He's someone, what I like, there's almost like a yin and yang quality. He's a straight shooter, and I love that about him, and a heart of gold. So I could say all kinds of things about his accomplishments, but that really is the bottom line, is that, Roland, you're someone that has this beautiful heart and so dedicated to this work and helping people.
Beautiful. Thank you, TJ. So, Roland, I'd love for you to, because you have been around for quite a while. You've done a lot of work. You've supported a lot of different communities. Let's tackle that topic of shame. What what are some of your tools, or what do you say to people when you hit that place when you're coaching them, where they acknowledge that they have tremendous shame about their alcoholism or their anything? How do you support people in that way?
Well, let me just first apologize. I have an elderly bulldog at my feet and he's snoring, which he does all day long. And so if you hear that in the background, that's my dog snoring. He's an old man. And he has no shame about it, by the way. He has no guilt and no shame about that. He will snore and pass gas and all day long and has no shame or guilt about either one. I think what comes up for me, and I love these guys, I love this forum. One of the things I've been in this business of trying to help people who are struggling with addictions and all of the repercussions of having a life that's full of addictions and acting out that goes with that. I've been working with people trying to pick up the pieces for the last 35 years. And so I've seen a lot in this business. I've seen the shame, the wounds that are left after a person has spent a lot of time and energy trying to fix something that can't be fixed by a substance or a process. And the frustration and the fear and the hopelessness that comes from that. And one of the things that I've noticed over my professional career is that there aren't enough, and TJ has alluded to this, and AJ has alluded to this. There aren't enough people, I think, in the business that are doing the right thing for the right reason. I think that things shift. I think we have a lot of people who are telling people what they need to do and telling people what needs to happen in order for them to get better. And sometimes there's a conflict of interest. Sometimes people have their own agenda. The teachers, some people shouldn't be teaching. Some people shouldn't be therapists. Some people shouldn't be the boss of other people. Some people shouldn't be parents, bosses, etc. And so I've seen a lot of things that are kind of heartbreaking in this business of us in the name, things being done in the name of healing or helping people get better. And I've also seen a lot of people who, in my opinion, are passing along and giving energy to bad information. Like the message that they're sending is and could be considered the wrong message. Certainly it might be the wrong message for some people. And it's being presented as though it's a fact. And it used to be blasphemous to challenge some of the dialogue that was happening in these places and by these people. If you challenge that, it was, what do you know? Your best thinking got you here. And it would break somebody's heart. It'd be, like I said before, it'd be like you're telling somebody their baby is ugly. You're telling somebody that what saved your life might kill me. So it's been rough. And so when I see people like AJ and TJ and people who they say that we don't care how much you know until we know how much you care. Like I'm seeing somebody who has compassion and knowledge together. That's a wonderful combination. And I see it both with these two guys. Not only do they have knowledge, they're brilliant and they're compassionate, they're authentic. And authenticity is such a rare thing, unfortunately, in this business. And to have people be teachable and to be open to new ways and recognizing that there's no one size fits all, that if we really want to help somebody, if we really want to help somebody address, heal, move forward past a place that they've been stuck for a long time, you have to really get to know that person. You have to stop what you're doing and you have to recognize that, before I tell you what I think you might help you, you tell me what you think might help you.
Yes.
You tell me your story. One of the things I've been doing, I still see people, and I don't have to, but I like to. You know, I've been doing this long enough. I don't have to see people individually, and I don't have to work with families. You know, I spend a lot of time working with businesses and treatment centers and that sort of thing. But I like seeing clients. And one of the first things that I do in my therapy practice with people, or my work with people, is I shut up. And I don't come in with a pen and paper, and I'm not taking notes while they're talking. I say, tell me your story. Tell me your story. And I listen. I listen to their story. And then we work together. I try to work with people together to try to get to some of the stuff that they feel is holding them back. Try to work together to see what kind of things do you want to work on? What kind of things do you want to change? And how do you think we might be able to do that? And I have a lot in my toolkit, you know. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I have a lot of tools, but I don't assume that I know what the right tool is for this particular person. And that's one of the things I love about TJ's work. And I've watched TJ, I've watched this blossom. You know, I've watched this start as an idea, and I've watched TJ work with people. And I've watched TJ's, his I don't know about this, you know, maybe there's a better way to do this. I don't know if we're really looking at this the right way. And I've watched it evolve to become conscious recovery, and to hear TJ articulate it. I think, as you said, Scott, that, or as AJ said, that TJ has figured out a practical way to give people a different way of looking at how we've been treating people with these problems, with these issues. And it's a loving, kind, forgiving, understanding, inclusive way. It's a non-adversarial way. And you know, people just respond to that. People respond to that. That's so core, that people just want to feel like I'm not being judged, I'm not being pigeonholed, I'm not being forced into a box, that I'm okay to be who I am. So maybe if I don't start from a place of being not okay, I don't have to. The goal isn't to make you okay, by the way. And TJ's model really, TJ put words to some ambivalence that a lot of providers have had for years. And one of the things, and this is something in common with TJ and AJ, I've had people approach me many, many times, say, look, I want to do something in this field. I want to open up a treatment center. I want to write a book. I want to do this. I want to do that. And you know what most of the time happens, that people don't follow through with it. They don't put the energy into actually making it happen. And you're looking at 2 people, 3 people, and myself included, that actually put the energy into saying, look, I got an idea. I believe that there's something that we can do to have some impact in the struggles that so many people are going through, that we all have a personal attachment to somehow. You know, we all have a personal attachment to this struggle, to struggle in general. Everybody knows what it's like to struggle. Like, people with drug and alcohol issues don't have a monopoly on struggling. Don't have a monopoly on making bad decisions, or making decisions that can be looked at as self-defeating. But these guys said, I want to do something about it. And they actually are doing it. And that's inspiring to me. And I think that encourages other people to do it, you know, to say, I'm going to put some energy into seeing if I can change my direction. So that's kind of what I want to say. I don't know if I answered your question, Scott, but I'm sorry.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, I just want to acknowledge how much I appreciate that. Even though you've been in the business for 35 years, I love what you said about how you start from scratch with each person. You shut up and you listen. That's so beautiful. And it is so different than, I'm the expert. All right, I'm here and I'm going to tell you exactly what you need to do. There's a wonderful quote. We've had Deepak Chopra on Saturday Night Live a few times. And he has a wonderful quote. He says, people do not die from cancer. People die from the diagnosis of cancer. And that so sums it up. It so sums up how an evaluation or a diagnosis can just set us reeling. And obviously, recovery, you know, it's a big business. You know, it's thousands of dollars a day to go to these recovery centers and live the life of Riley and get all the treatments, and then what's the numbers are staggering. Something like people go to them 8 times before they quit or whatever it is. So it's beautiful, the alternative that all of you are providing, and that it's compassion based. It's, and again, that's Love Coach Academy. Our whole teachings are built on what I learned from my mentor, Marshall Rosenberg, the founder of Compassionate Communication. So it's that presence and that compassion that's beautiful. Trish has offered to share a little bit of her story, and I think that'll lead to some interesting conversation.
First, I really want to say that about the shame piece, like, you want to get stuck somewhere and not being able to grow anywhere is really just to like dig your shame guilt complex. Like that's what I did for a long time. Just on a little side note is that I've really uncovered recently, there's a shame guilt complex within my mother's side of the family, and they play it out on each other in this particular way that makes them all want to run away. That's part of a little bit of my story, is that, my parents were divorced really young, like 3 months old, that I started to create ways as a child to get my needs met. If I was really, really good, then I could get my dad's attention. And if I was really bad, then like bad things would happen. And so I facaded this experience in my life to get my needs met. My need for safety, my need for attention, my need for food. Like there was all these things that I created, and then just to throw in some socioeconomic status kind of pieces, is I grew up in a trailer park in Montana with my mother in a 600-person community. Like it's the tiniest little town, like 5.15 was minimum wage. There was just like nothing. And then my father, who was in the middle class. So there was all these like trying to maneuver through the world, being a woman, having to contort for, to get my needs met, and just that, and that whole systemic belief system about this, socioeconomic status and being a woman. And so as I realize how I'm creating, as now in the last 10 years, how I'm creating situations in my life to get my needs met, which put me into very crazy, dangerous situations, especially with sex, drugs, alcohol. I started to crave feeling okay, because society doesn't really give us the coping skills to manage or even to process our emotions. So I got into, I never really got into heavy drugs, but I got into psychedelics and ecstasy. Ecstasy was like all the time. Most of the few years that I was doing it, it was like straight through. And the things that I was mostly addicted to was really in that codependent patterning, trying to meet your needs for like as a child, as a codependent, like bonding piece. Beyond that, it was sex. Because sex was the closest place that I could feel connection inside of myself and with another person. So it was like, and then the alcohol piece was a social connection piece. And after I really dissolved it and started to step into what I'm really driven by, obviously, connection, collaboration, and human interaction, that it started to dissolve a little bit of like, can I be uncomfortable? Can I just be in uncomfortable? And I love and can be compassionate with myself here. And I love what you all three are saying, and Scott too, what we all four are saying, and what the foundation of your work is, especially for men. Like I love hearing that men are like, yes, I can hold people in their deep, dark, like, like that's changing the world beyond just recovery. That's changing how we interact with each other on a global level. Like just showing up and seeing the person for all of that they are, and making them whole and complete, and looking at them that way. Like, thank you.
So just curious, thank you, first of all, for sharing so vulnerably about your history. Because I know you very well, you're one of my dearest friends, and you are now sober and you are discerning and you are a healthy, balanced woman. What were some of the tools? What are some of the things that got you there? That got you from that one place where you're putting yourself at risk to where you are now?
Well, the biggest thing was stepping away from people who were shaming me. Guilt and shame, that was just literally like the whole spiritual community. I had to step away because there was like, anger's bad. I stuffed my anger for fucking 30 years. Okay? Like that wasn't okay for me. That just created so much stuff. So when I started to step away and was like, whoa, okay, that's not actually helpful. In fact, it creates more I'm bad, wrong, and I'm unlovable. The it's all good thing didn't work for me. The first thing that helped was a really profound hypnotist who helped me stop the nightmares from the sexual assaults that I experienced. That was the first one. And then from there, I found Christine and Dick Price's work, Gestalt, the Gestalt awareness practice, dropping in, slowing down, and actually learning to acknowledge my feelings. You get it off, like feelings, I didn't want to do that. And then I found embodied Gestalt, which meant I didn't have to process outward. I didn't have to say a word, that I could just get into my body. I could just express out flamboyant movement and really process my emotions without processing my language. And then all of that dropped me into your work, Scott. And I swear to God, like if I was just to give everyone one thing to do for the rest of their life, I would just say the self-empathy tool. How to go from the neurotic brain, how to really like acknowledge your own feelings, and then to just acknowledge your wants, needs, and your drivers, like what your value system is that's like pushing you forward, and to be able to speak from that place. Because not only does it do that, like if I ask TJ and I'm like, my need for connection needs to be met, can you collaborate with me right here? Because I'm unregulated. But here's the key point is that I've self-regulated enough to ask TJ that. But the cool thing, Scott, just one more piece, is the cool thing about the self-empathy tool is that as I become more compassionate and empathetic with myself, that my capacity to be empathetic with another person just increases like vast exponentially. Is that now, because I can actually process it myself, I can come to AJ or Roland or you or TJ and be like, I've self-sourced this and now I'm ready to hold your stuff too, because that's relationship. Those are the things.
Beautiful. I'd just love to open it up. I'm going to go to gallery view. Is anything that any of you want to add that you were inspired by listening to Trish kind of share her story?
Well, I will start by saying thank you, and we'll have to have an offline discussion about ecstasy. Let's just say I was actually at the birthplace, literally, of ecstasy. I got sober really young before it actually got mainstream use, but we'll leave that. Except I will say there's not a surprise there when I hear your story, because what ecstasy did for me, which of course was a temporary experience, but it did it beautifully, was it took down the barriers. And it helped me to experience love. You talked about a couple of things that I think are really important. And of course, to clarify, it didn't keep working that way. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here talking about this, right? It did not continue to work that way, everyone. It worked that way once, and then I chased it for every weekend night for another year, and it got really dark. But at the root of it was this deep need to connect, and to connect with myself and to connect with each other. And I want to speak to something that you talked about, and that is, because I love Scott's question, so what did you do to heal it, right? What did we do to heal? And with conscious recovery, and I know it sounds like there's so much synchronicity for a lot of us, it really is about getting down to and having compassion for the little self, right? The child, the self that made these big, huge decisions at such a tender young age. Like at age 7, I closed my heart. I built a wall around my heart. And unfortunately, a lot of the mental health, or what used to be called mental illness, some people still say that, but I don't, or the addiction models, it's really tends to be cognitive, right? So how many times have you heard someone say, well, change your narrative, or change that story, or rewrite that story? And if it were just that simple, first of all, people wouldn't be in treatment 5 and 6 times, or maybe feeling stuck in therapy for 20 years, because really it is about getting down, and as Trish said so beautifully, learning how to actually feel the emotion, have that emotion, have compassion for myself as a being that has emotions, right? And so the reparenting is such a huge part of it. It's just so crucial. The other thing, and I'll close with this, Trish, I love that you talked about the spiritual community that only, really, I was part of a spiritual community, and they literally would say, oh, cancel, don't say that. That's negative. Don't talk about anything but love and light. And what I did was I buried what I thought was my humanity. And I thought there was something wrong with my humanity. And I would hear people say we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I woke up one day, I just shot out of bed, and I thought, no, we are spiritual beings having spiritual experiences. That all of it is part of the spiritual journey, that there is no such thing as a negative emotion. I actually have gone to treatment centers, and they would list the positive emotions and the negative emotions on the wall. And that's addiction. It's like, this is negative and I must be rid of it. This is positive. I want more of that, right? So living in that duality, and, my darkest times have been equally as useful, if not more useful, than the times that I'm like, oh, that was so wonderful. And if nothing else, my own sexual trauma, for example, and healing my own sexual trauma, or always a process, but in that healing process has made me uniquely available to be present with someone else's without going into a story of blame or feeling sorry for someone, right? Oh, that's so horrible that happened to you. No, let's be with this. So once something's healed, we hear hurt people. I think I said this on Saturday night, but we hear hurt people. Well, healed people heal people too. We're a presence for that. Like, I'm not healing someone. It's by my own healing. And that's true for all of us here. Through my own healing, I become a presence for that.
I love that you're saying that, because it's so important that, again, yeah, I'm just going to reiterate, there are no bad, good feelings.
Right.
Humaning is just emoting. And I have this idea that I've come to this planet just to have sensation. Like, I reincarnated here, Disneyland, to just sensate out. Like, I'm just here to emote and ride the roller coaster of that, and to connect with other people.
Well, I think you've come to the right place. There are plenty of opportunities to have emotions on planet Earth.
Body's really fabulous.
That's right.
It does all sorts of things. There's pain. What we've considered as pain.
Right.
I do want to say one thing, because I have this thought about healing. I have the word healing, and I haven't been using it for a very long time, because I went to speaking of sexual trauma. Sorry, Scott, I'm taking this somewhere.
Go for it.
I went to this beautiful healing retreat. And this woman, she got up, and at the end of this amazing 7 days, we were all psychedelically high just on the process work. It was fantastic. And she got up and she's like, I'm not effing healing because I'm not effing broken.
That's right.
And I was like, oh, I can't use that word anymore. And I've used transformation ever since.
Yeah.
But I use healing when it's someone else's, what their understanding of language is.
Right.
Of what that looks like for them.
Yes.
Gosh, you guys are so beautiful. I love these beautiful men, Scott. Thank you for bringing them.
Absolutely. Gosh, there's so many different places that we can go, but I think what I want to hear a little bit more from AJ and Roland. And I just, since we kind of went down that road, there's a very famous spiritual teacher that I got to know, and he talked a lot about how on this planet, in this plane of consciousness, because of the illusion of separation and because of being in animal bodies, food and sex are amazing. That there's no other place in all the cosmos where food and sex is so incredible. And that's why so many people are really into food or really into sex. And Neem Karoli Baba, who was Ram Dass's guru, talked about that. And for him, it was food. And they would just like eat. And you see the picture of him, he was like gluttonous and he just loved to eat. And he said, you know, when I lose my appetite, I'll leave my body because that's what keeps me here. Because the bliss, that kind of permanent ecstatic, non-drug ecstatic bliss that exists in the higher realms is so yummy. And it's so dense down here. But there's nothing like food, there's nothing like sex. So I just wanted to add that. And for anybody listening, if you really love food, or you really love sex, or you really love to get high, there's nothing wrong with you. It's a natural human urge. And then our pleasure memory stores the memory of, wow, that was really good. I want more. You know, whether it's Haagen-Dazs ice cream or sex with our lover or, you know, a substance that put us into that state. So with that kind of, I'd love to open it up to the question of how do we manage our pleasure center? Like TJ said, he was chasing that first ecstasy high that changed his life. And, you know, there's that famous line that every heroin addict is trying to repeat their first heroin high. So how do we manage our pleasure center that just remembers how yummy something tasted or felt when we recognize we can't keep chasing it? We're chasing it. The compulsion is now causing more damage than good. How do we tackle that one? I'll open it up to anybody who wants to.
I want to say something. Yeah. I just want to say a couple of things, actually. For people that have gotten to a point where they've figured out the way that I deal with the thing that I'm chasing, and people sometimes are trying to get away from something, and people are sometimes trying to get to something. So people are sometimes running towards it, and sometimes people are running away from whatever it is. They think that the substance or the process is going to help them to achieve something that they don't feel they could achieve on their own, or they think the substance or the process is going to help them get away from something that they don't feel that they can get away from on their own. And drugs and different kinds of behaviors are real effective at that. You know, it's real effective at changing the way we feel. It's real effective at providing a temporary, usually a temporary anesthetic, you know. But it often, as TJ mentioned, it doesn't last. And then we're off to something else. And I want to say something about the people, your listeners that you might have that are wanting to be real conscious and wanting to really have a full expression of emotions and have a clear, higher way of thinking and viewing and being in the world. But they've gotten caught up with the drugs and alcohol, or whatever the process is. They're caught up right now. So there's some people that I have a higher self inside of me somewhere. I know that. But what I'm doing right now is not consistent with that. Like I'm doing some stuff right now that I know is blocking me from being my true, authentic, higher self. And I've actually transformed into something that's very different than I want it to be. And I don't know how to get out of it. And I just want to say that it's so important for people to understand that I don't know how you're going to do it. I mean, I have ideas about how people do it, and a lot of people there are a lot of people out there that can give some suggestions. But I think it's real important for people to figure out how to get off of the stuff that they're using in order to open up their consciousness and open up their heart and their spirit. Like the first thing, like abstinence it's not recovery. Abstinence is not recovery. Abstinence is just a prerequisite for it. Like, people got to figure out, how do I get this stuff out of my system first so that my brain is working, my heart is working, my spirit is open. And I think that a lot of people are stuck because they don't know how to get past that. And they think that, and it could be your journey, but a lot of people think that maybe I can still be my higher self while I'm doing heroin, and while I'm doing cocaine, and while I'm smoking crack, and while I'm drinking to the point where I'm blacking out, while I'm doing this behavior that's contributing to me feeling like I'm hurting myself. Knowing that, as TJ said, it stopped working a long time ago. And I haven't stopped doing it because I don't know how, or I'm afraid of what it's going to feel like when I stop. Some drugs have actual physical withdrawal symptoms that are miserable. Alcohol withdrawal can kill you. I mean, the reality is that you can die from alcohol withdrawal. So I think that it's important to encourage, for me it is. I think it's important to encourage people that, try to find a way that works for you, to get the stuff out of your system for long enough, take a break. Find a way to safely get it out of your system so that your spirit and your mind and your emotions are not clogged up and distorted by whatever it is that you're doing, and get some help with that. Because one of the paradoxes of this recovery thing is that you alone can do it, but you can't do it alone. So, get some help with that. And what I've noticed for a lot of people is that, and I think, Scott, you're alluding to this, is that a lot of substance users, drugs, alcohol, will stop using the drugs and alcohol. And we have a saying in the industry that a lot of people will put down the spoon and pick up the fork.
Right.
I think I gained 30 pounds my first year of recovery. I gained 30 pounds the first year because I was skinny my whole life. In my addicted life, when I was using, I was skinny because I'd rather do drugs than eat. And then I got clean and sober, and then I started eating. And then when I was active in my addiction, I actually didn't like sex. I thought that anybody who really needed sex was weak. I didn't want to need anything other than my drugs. And then when I got clean and sober, some girl gave me a hug, and I was like, damn! And my body woke up. And then I went crazy, And so what a lot of people do is that they'll substitute. They'll stop using the drugs and alcohol, and then they go to food and sex, which are the two top ones. And then, then it graduates. People find it's like whack-a-mole. We always talking about that. People are finding some other way to act out, to try to fix that stuff that TJ's talking about. Try to fix that stuff that Gabor is talking about. Try to fix that stuff that you're talking about, Scott, and that Trisha's talking about. That stuff that's inside. It just is. I don't really know what it is, but I know it needs some movement. I want to move it from where it was to another place. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I know it's an inside job intuitively. And people will find, we have such a low tolerance for discomfort. And so when we feel uncomfortable, we think something's wrong and I need to do something, take something, drink something, screw something, eat something in order to feel better. And so what I've learned in my years to me is that it's not about feeling good. And like what TJ said, sometimes some of the most difficult events that have happened in our life have been some of the most necessary and some of the most healing and some of the most like springboards into a new awareness and a new way of being. And so to put a label on that I'm going through something right now and it's bad and I shouldn't be going through that, maybe it's not that bad. It may not feel good, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Yeah. And I just think that, I felt like I really wanted to say, if in summary of what I'm trying to say, how important I think it is to, if you want to grow, if you want to heal, for lack of a better word, and you're active right now in some addictive behavior, and you know that by your own definition, not by my definition, by your own definition. If you feel like you're active in something that's self-defeating and it's an addictive type of behavior, because this show is about addiction, I would encourage you to try to get abstinent. Try to stop using so you can get the clarity that you need to do the work that you need to do. I just want to say that.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you. I do want to read a couple of comments that have come in from our listeners or people who are watching. And then to kind of wrap us up, I have one more question. So I'll tell you what the question is now, and then you guys can all think about it. I'm sure you've been asked 1,000 times. The question is going to be, what's your advice for people that are very close to family members or loved ones that are using that, you know, John sees that Sally's using and it's hurting Sally and John wants to help? What's your advice for John? So we're going to get to that in a moment. But I want to acknowledge, thank you, Joyce. She's watching on Facebook. She writes, shame seems to be the prime motivating force in our patriarchal, paternalistic world. It's a way of dominating people. So thank you, Joyce. I tend to agree with that. Nancy has suggested weaning off in response to what Roland was saying about becoming abstinent, to wean ourselves. So I'm curious if any of you have any thoughts about that. And Jerry Anderson, our mystic abbot, writes, often chasing filling the empty space is because people have the illusion of separation and they have not realized or are currently not realizing their true eternal self. And I definitely want us to tackle that, because if we're lucky, we've had some sort of a spiritual revelation, some sort of an oceanic experience where we've experienced, not because we read it in a book, but we've actually experienced our oneness with God, our oneness with life. Maybe for some people, it's oneness through Jesus or through a religion. Others, it's just one with nature. If we've had that epiphany, if we've had that near-death experience or that psychedelic experience where we remembered, oh my God, I'm eternal, I'm multidimensional, I'm not just in the body, that's a real blessing. But for people who haven't had that experience, then hearing us talk about the illusion of separation and being connected to the one can almost seem like we're, you know, you haven't been invited to the ultimate party, right? Let me tell you all about this incredible party that we're hip to, and oh, you haven't experienced it? Too bad. It's a hard one. I have a lot of compassion for people that haven't had that experience. My mother had never had that experience, and dying was very difficult for her. She was a good Christian woman, but she really didn't know what was going to happen when she stopped breathing. So I'd love to kind of open it up. Does anybody want to tackle that? Like, I see TJ smiling, so I'm going to put the spotlight on you, TJ.
Well, thank you, because that's really the core of conscious recovery. It's that we come into the world deeply connected with our true nature, and then we separate from that true nature, right? So identifying the three root causes of addiction as unresolved trauma, spiritual disconnection, and toxic shame. And I think sometimes when we hear the term spiritual connection or disconnection, we might think of something up there or out there. And really what we're talking about is our true nature, our essential beingness, right? And so regardless of where someone is in terms of spiritual belief, because a lot of times we think spirituality is a belief, and actually that lives in the mental room. There's nothing inherently wrong with that or right about that. It's just beliefs are thoughts. Spirituality to me is an experience, and it's really an internal experience. And so what he's saying is so powerful, because it is in the separation from that. The separation from my true nature is what creates the belief that I need that fulfillment from the world. And it's not just a belief, then it becomes the experience, right? Because I've separated with my true nature, and I have an experience. You know, I love what Roland said. I hugged her and whoa, right? Oh, I had that experience. There was something that happened. And now I'm thinking that can bring it to me. And it does temporarily. And, you know, in some recovery circles, they use the term, they talk about having a God-shaped hole. And then they say only God can fill that. But I actually want to offer a little different perspective. The idea that the idea of God, whatever that means to you, is supposed to fill that, to me, is actually still an addictive thought. Because, you know, when Trish talks about healing, right, it's really wholeness. It's not really healing. It's the great remembering that we're already essentially that. And so it's not about filling that emptiness up with something. In some ways, it's about learning how to be with it and to walk with it. And then, we could do an entire hour on the illusion of separation, right? Because that is what happens. We start to believe that we're broken or damaged or separate from, or not good enough, not lovable. And then we're walking around with that frequency. And then we find relief outside of ourselves and we want more. The issue, though, Trish, you said it so beautifully earlier. If I'm walking around believing I'm not lovable, and I'm trying to find relationships to feel more lovable, the issue is it's the frequency of the unlovability that becomes my chooser. It's really popular in our culture now to talk about what we're attracting. I keep attracting. Roland, if you and I could have, and Scott too, I'm sure, if we could have $100 for every time someone said, why do I keep attracting unavailable people? We could have retired decades ago, right? Because that's really popular to say. My friend Marianne Williamson says, I was on that treadmill. I had a Walkman. That's how long ago it was. I had a Walkman. I was on the treadmill. And she said, the first important step is to stop saying, why am I attracting this? And to start saying, why am I attracted to it? Right? But not from a place of blame or shame, because it's very easy to go into a place of blame or shame, but then to become curious. Well, of course, I chose the absolute perfect partner to confirm the core false belief. It wasn't conscious, but I felt unlovable. So I could go into a room and the person that was very available to love me, I would literally repel from it. It wasn't about attracting that. It was like, oh, there he is right over there. That's the one I want to get into a relationship with. And it wasn't conscious. On a conscious level, it was please love me, please love me, please love me. On an unconscious level, it's like, I'm only going to choose. These people weren't bad people, right? They chose me because I was going to confirm their core false belief. The last thing I'll say, I remember at one point I was going to Thanksgiving at my family's and I had this narrative of like, oh God, I'm going to early recovery. Oh my God, I'm going to be with my family and they're going to push all my buttons and they're going to trigger me. And I'm like, oh wait, I'm their family member. I'm about to do that to them. There was like this big epiphany. It's like, oh, we have all these unconscious patterns. And as long as they stay in the unconscious, we're just pushing up against it and pushing each other's buttons.
My business calls it sacred friends. It's supposed to touch those places so that you can look at it and love yourself more deeply.
Wow. Thank you so much, TJ. Thank you. Beautifully stated. All right, the last question of the night, and then we've got kind of I want to hear from AJ a little bit more about wholehearted. But that question, oh yes.
Do you mind if I actually talk a little bit about what TJ and Roland were speaking about?
I would love for you to, absolutely.
So I'm not in like recovery in the traditional sense. I've never used drugs. I don't drink. I don't even drink coffee. And I know a lot of people will be shocked by that. And I've never had like the profound shift or spiritual experience. One of the things I struggle with and always have struggled with, and it's maybe even obvious in just how I speak, is I don't feel a lot of high or low emotions. I have a lot of numbness in me, and I'm a workaholic. So that really is my brilliant strategy, my coping mechanism, that my core false belief is I can't actually heal myself or help myself, but I can help others through partnering with people like TJ and Roland. That I don't maybe have a lot of profound or enlightened things to say, but I can at least be part of other people's journey and sharing that with others. And so I might be like a lot of the people that are watching this, trying to figure out, well, when will this change happen for me, or when will I experience that? And I know that that's just part of the inner work. And I know that that's perhaps wholehearted is part of my timid entry into that self-exploration. And what I want to say is, if you haven't had that experience yet, it's okay. It's taken me a long time to have and find compassion for myself to say, you've had some experiences that make it more comfortable to go through life by suppressing some of those feelings of joy or fear. And I have a lot of anxiety. Often I struggle with that. And I know that the anxiety is a result of me pushing things down, and I push down joy and I avoid it. And I bury myself in work, and I'm afraid to create personal relationships because I feel like close personal relationships or intimate relationships won't meet my needs. So I instead have working relationships and transactional relationships. So I'm on this journey myself. And I say all this because you've done a lot of, you spent a lot of time promoting Wholehearted, and so have all these other people, and I really appreciate it. And since I'm the main driver behind all of it, I want to be completely transparent and authentic and say that I'm on this journey too in my own way. And I'm very privileged to be able to spend time with Gabor and TJ and Roland and Mark Lantome and Dr. Davis and all these incredible people that we've worked with. And so Wholehearted is really an exercise of me being able to learn a little bit about myself, but also my interest and desire to share what these people have with everybody else, because I have a lot of my own wounds. And so I know a lot of other people do out there as well. And one thing I have really learned is there's no difference, at least in my perspective, between my workaholism or my struggle with anxiety and somebody else's struggle with drugs or alcohol or other addictive behaviors. And the thing that's really stood out to me is when you can get to a place of curiosity and openness and compassion for yourself, then you can truly have that for others. And I have windows of time where I have that, and I have windows of time where I fall into shame and judgment, because that's, feels safer sometimes. And I had lunch with TJ, and there was an uncomfortable situation with another person that was there, and I know he remembers. And TJ said, when things get uncomfortable, sometimes his response is to retreat. And it stuck with me because that's exactly my response. If I feel shame, if I feel embarrassment, if I feel struggle, I want to run away, and I want to avoid anyone I ever saw when that happened. He also said, judgment cuts off connection. If you judge, you aren't able to connect. You're not able to see yourself in someone else. And I've never forgot that. And I think about that all the time. And I don't think I've even told him this, but it's these little pieces and experiences that make me feel more okay about being alive and a little more comfortable being in my own skin. So I hope that when people go to Wholehearted or anywhere they go for information and they get to see people like Roland and TJ, that whether you're in recovery or not, or struggling with an addiction or not, these individuals have so much to say that you can apply to all walks of life. And their philosophy and approach comes from their own lived suffering and pain and wisdom. And so there's thousands of years worth of wisdom on wholehearted.org. And that's really what it's all about. And over half of our material is free. You don't need any money to see it. And so my favorite talk of TJ is called Everyday Compassion. So if you go to wholehearted.org and you click Discover in the top, you'll see Everyday Compassion featured. It's an incredible talk. I am so privileged to have been part of helping TJ put it together. But there's just really so much there that can make a difference for people. And I hope that I hope sharing that lets people know that you don't have to be at a place of having figured it out or healed or making a lot of progress to be of help to others and to continue helping yourself. At least that's my story.
Beautiful. AJ, you're a wonderful speaker. You're very, very concise and clear, and you're a wonderful speaker.
Thank you for letting me share.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go back. I did pull this up while you were talking. Again, please go to wholehearted.org. There's so much. And like you said, half of this is all free. It's not just, it's incredible how generous AJ is with providing this. and it's beautiful how many amazing people he's got contributing, including our friend Marianne Williamson, who's been on Saturday Night Live several times. Of course, TJ and Roland, who you've met tonight. And I look forward to discovering your other people, discovering Mark and Jeremy and John and Dr. BJ. So there's some really wonderful new people to discover here, and I'm looking forward to that. I would love to get that answer to that question of, and it'll be our last question of the night, how do we manage a really well-meaning relative or friend who wants to help their friend get healthy, get healed, whatever words we want to use. What's your Roland? Thank you.
I encourage people to, if you have someone that you love or someone that you care about and you see that they're struggling, I encourage people to be honest about that. I think the best thing that you can do is be honest and say that I'm worried about you. Be willing to be wrong. I don't think you ought to diagnose anybody, but I think it is perfectly appropriate for you to say, I'm worried about you. I'm concerned. Can I help? I think pretending like it's not a problem or thinking that it's going to work itself out or being afraid that if you say something, you're going to hurt people's feelings or you're going to upset them, or you're protecting yourself from their response. And so you don't say it. Here's why I say that, because so many times, and TJ for sure knows this, and those of us who have worked around addiction for years, we've got a lot of tragedies that we know about, that there's a wonderful, beautiful spirit got snuffed out, that died because of their addiction. And you know what happens when people die or when something horrible happens as a result of addiction? Those of us who are left behind think about, wow, I wish I could have done, I wonder, could I have done something different? Because I knew, I was concerned, we all were, and what could we have done differently? And so the people left behind always are thinking that I wish that I would have done something. And so what I would suggest, if you have a concern about a loved one that might be on that road, on that path, by all means, I would say something about it in a compassionate, non-judgmental way. I'm worried about you. And I love you too much to sit around and watch you destroy yourself. And again, be willing to be wrong. But I think not saying anything can be one of your biggest regrets if something happens to that person. And I think that there's a thing we use in therapy. It's called SBIRT, and it's an acronym. It stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. And what it really means is that just a simple conversation to a person who's struggling, a simple, honest conversation can have an incredible impact. It doesn't have to be an all night, hour-long process. Just a simple conversation is this: hey, this is what I'm seeing, and I'm worried about you. And I love you too much. I care too much about you to sit around to watch it happen and not say anything. So I say be direct and be honest and be compassionate.
Beautiful. You know what I like about what you said too is your advice, as I heard it, was sharing your care for the other person, but you be open to being wrong, and you didn't say anything about going in and offering solutions. You should do this, you should do that, and that's so important. No you shoulds, but I care. What's going on, pal? What's going on? I care about you. So, and that's what we all want. We all want to be cared for. Like TJ said earlier, blame is like such a low vibration. And one of the things I often say is that the ego can only manage so much shame until it comes to the rescue and we flip into blame, right? Blame is where the ego often goes to protect itself from its shame. But the other side of that is care. We all want to be cared for, and we want to know that people care about us. Any other thoughts on that particular topic before we wrap up? No? Trish.
Well, we're just gonna drive the key point home is you can stay out of judgment and just sit with them? Can you be in their discomfort with them? Can you be compassionate? You know, there's people that I know who are still using. There's people that I know who are still like having sex for they're getting their needs met for attention and for closeness. They can't find that in themselves, or they're scared to. And so it's just, can I be with them? Meaning, like, can I sit in compassionate meditation, just like, how do I connect with them there? And what, I don't need to enable the behavior. But I can just be and understand and just like, yes, listen. Because that's what, you've said this a zillion times, Scott, and I know this is one of the foundations that you teach, is that, we want to be loved for being ourselves, our human selves, our messy, like, we just want to be loved and accepted. And that's really, like, if I go to someone and like, you're bad and wrong for doing these things, like, that's just not going to make them safe to want to shift or change. So the compassionate approach is really the key to really do anything, to love deeper. And, for you guys have heard me share this, is that my definition of love has changed over the last few years. And it no longer looked like whatever weird social thing that it looked like, but more of radical acceptance of what is. And can I love that person in their choices without making it mean anything about me? Without making it mean dehumanizing them in any way or objectifying them in any way, but to really be with them in their humanity. And Grant.
Beautiful. Well, I am going to actually take a minute to just acknowledge Trisha is a great coach, and you can learn more about her when she's at Radical Acceptance. I remembered that she's got this wonderful website, which is really her website. And if you want to learn more about Trish, she's a brilliant coach. Go to embodied-happiness.com and discover the path to radical self-acceptance and how you can walk that path with our beloved friend Trish.
Oh, Scott.
Absolutely. And while we are on it, I'm going to go to each of you and your websites. I'm going to go next to our friend TJ. And TJ, I've got Conscious Recovery here. Tell us a little bit, and I know you did this last week, but for anybody watching who didn't see it, I love how you broke down your website with I am. Oh. So when you go to consciousrecovery.com, scroll right up to I am, and which of these three categories do you fall into? And then that's my cue to you, TJ, to share with us what you offer to an individual, to a professional, and to a treatment program.
Yeah, so exactly. I am an individual. I guess we're all individuals, but I'm an individual person who is in recovery or struggling with an addiction. And there you'll find book, workbook. There's a link to the course on Wholehearted that AJ talked about. There are actually 2 different courses on Wholehearted geared toward the individual person, either in recovery or wanting to get into recovery. The professional, I am a professional working in the field. We now have a certification process where you can become a conscious recovery certified coach. There's a process there. Part of that's on Wholehearted, of course, and part of that's in person. And then the last thing, and it's maybe it's a little bit of a teaser, but I am a treatment program. I'm a person who owns or operates a treatment program. There's a way for your treatment program to become certified, which involves me coming in and doing training, and you use the curriculum. But we're actually about to launch a fully digital version on wholehearted.org in the next week or so. So you heard it here first.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you. And Roland, I want to give people a chance to see how they can reach you. And so I've gone to your website, and his website is rolandwilliamsconsulting.com. rolandwilliamsconsulting.com. And I think what I'm touched by, Roland, is that, even though you are a consultant to so many businesses and larger organizations and communities, people, that you still are willing to coach individuals and support people individually. And that's really quite beautiful. So I assume this is the best way for people to find out more about you and to contact you, yeah?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you. And it's really good getting to know you. I'm really appreciating it.
Thank you. You too.
And then finally, I'm going to go to AJ. And thank you again, AJ, for bringing us. And I'm looking forward to meeting you. Trisha and I are driving to Sacramento, where we're going to meet AJ on Monday. So we're looking forward to that. So AJ, I'm pulling up Wholehearted. Tell me, what are some of the things you'd like for people to make sure they know about?
Okay, so the first thing is when you go to the website, at the very top is the main navigation.
Right.
I encourage everyone to start at Discover. If you start Discover, everything on this page in this section is free. This is a new thing that we just put up, so there's only a handful of things. But starting on June 1st, we're going to be releasing probably about 50 programs. So 5 to 6 a day will be added. Wow. There will be conversations and talks with Roland and Bob Tyler and TJ Woodward and Mark Lundholm. There is a free talk. Well, there's 2 free talks with TJ on there right now. One's called Everyday Compassion and one's called The Return to Wholeness. There's free comedy shows, recovery-focused comedy shows from Mark Lundholm. And there's a free 1-hour talk by Dr. Gabor Mate. And we spoke about him in the beginning of the program. So it's been watched by over 1 million people now. It's his most popular talk. If you haven't seen it, I suggest you take a look. You can share it. You can. It's a great way to share Gabor with your friends and family. Same way to share TJ and Roland will have some numerous videos up there, probably on Wednesday of next week. So June 1st, June 2nd. A couple other free resources that I'd like to just let people know about is there's going to, Gabor Mate is focused, the focus of a documentary called The Wisdom of Trauma, which will be released I believe June 8th, and there's a suggested donation, but if you can't afford it, you can put in $0 and you can watch it for free. There's also a series of talks that the SAND organization that's hosting it is putting together with Gabor and some other speakers in the field. And so I think it's going to be a great opportunity for people to learn more about Gabor and also become more informed about trauma. In the meantime, you can start with the Power of Connection at wholehearted.org. And there's another documentary with Gabor Mate that will be featured on Wholehearted on June 1st called Is Your Story Making You Sick? And it has Dan Siegel and a couple of other people in it too. It's a really excellent program. And then if someone is interested in going deeper into any of this work, like TJ said, we have 2 programs on wholehearted.org that people can sign up to. And another program that I'm aware of is Roland Williams' Relapse Prevention Synapse training, which is wonderful. And we'll have some content about that as well on Wholehearted where people can learn more about it. And they can go to Roland's website and contact him to sign up and become a trainer. And Wholehearted hopes to be involved in the process down the road to help bring that to more people as well. And we have the program we already covered, Healing Trauma and Addiction with Dr. Gabor Mate for individuals. We also have a masterclass for healers, which is a professional training on wholehearted.org by Dr. Gabor Mate. He also has his compassionate inquiry certification. If you are a healthcare professional, like a physician that would like to get certified in it, it's a 1-year facilitated program. You can learn more about that at drgabormate.com. That's my spiel.
You did great. Well, we're going to do something tonight that we've never done before.
Scott, real quick, Scott.
Yes, Roland.
Could I just highlight just 2 small pieces on my website real quick because I didn't.
Absolutely. Let me go back and pull it up. I got it here. You are right. Okay, I'm coming back to you.
Thank you. Sorry.
Absolutely. It's not that one. Where are you? Here we go. Okay. And yes, Roland, what do you want me to show?
I want you to show the services.
Yes.
Yeah. And so right here, I just, because I do so many different things, but this really lists a few of the things that people may or may not be interested in. But it's similar in some ways with what TJ talked about. There's things that I do for individuals, things that I do for for therapists and things that I do for organizations. So I would encourage people to look at that. Yeah, and this is actually a talk TJ and I did years ago when I was a guest on one of TJ's shows, and it's a question about the 12-step programs, that 12-step model, and does it work for everyone, and what are some of the controversies, a discussion about that. It's a really good discussion. But I think just having people
I'm
know
not sure I understand.
Having people know some of the topics, for example, that I train on, I think are helpful to people, that those are below. I'm sure a lot of the people that are on this may or may not be interested in a training, but just a discussion about those topics. And the last thing is I do have a couple of workbooks that are very practical for people. And one particularly is called, and it's at the store link. It's called Recovery is a Verb. And I think that might be, that right there, that little picture there is actually a video of myself and a guy who runs the biggest treatment center in the city of Detroit. So his organization provides services in the inner city to the most people of any other provider in that city. It's amazing work that he's doing. So we had a good conversation. This is the book that I think, this is very practical, and I think that a lot of people who are interested in this topic, this can give you some tools, some support to help kind of walk you through going from not knowing what to do to having a better idea about what to do to kind of get unstuck, for lack of a better phrase. And it's called Recovery is a Verb, Intentionally. So I just wanted to show those two things. And peruse the website. There's a lot of stuff on there that I think is interesting. So thanks for that.
Roland, thank you. Thank you. We are going to do something a little different than I've never done before on this show. We're going to all kind of sign off and say goodbye, but instead of the show just being over, I'm going to actually play a video of TJ working with a client. So it's actually going to be an hour-long video. So we won't necessarily be here, but it'll continue to play. And so TJ, it's the anatomy of conscious recovery. And so before I play it, I would just love for you to tell us a little bit about what our viewers are going to see.
Yeah, and to start with, the person gave full consent. I want to absolutely start with that. So this is something that's on Wholehearted. It's part of the professional training. What does it mean to hold space, and what does it mean to look for the wholeness in someone? So when someone does the professional training and becomes certified in conscious recovery, they watch 3 different sessions that I lead.
During this trying time, during this challenge we had.
I did not mean to start. Sorry about that.
If you have a gift.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that's it. Just that for them to look at how we hold space and how we behold the wholeness in a person, and how we stand in a place of sit in a place of curiosity rather than offering feedback and advice. So that's really the simplest way to say it. And then hopefully it will speak for itself.
Beautiful. All right, well, I'm going to go to gallery view. Trish, do you have any final closing thoughts?
Well, I was just saying, wow, I'm really inspired. You all are fabulous teachers and such open, vibrant-hearted, safe, loving men. I'm so grateful that your work is out in the world, and thank you for just loving so deeply. I see you just, I'm like, slumped.
Thank you, everybody. All right, so stick around, everybody, and watch. I will periodically come and take a look at, that's my older dog that is just, calm down, almost. It's like he knows I'm about to finish, and it's like, okay, time to go for WALK. Anyway, here we go. I'm going to play Anatomy of Conscious Recovery. Guys and gal, thank you so much. Looking forward to meeting you on Monday, AJ. And Trisha and I are looking forward to coming out. God's blessings, everybody. And here we go. Let's take a look at this beautiful, beautiful video.
Gift you have to give.
Oops. Oh, and you know what? I definitely want to make sure I optimize the sound. There we go.
during this trying time, during this challenge we have, if you have a gift, you have to give. Shortcut for you. I got a lot of these. Helped me in my life, helped other people with their lives. If you have a gift, you have to give. And if you wind all this up for what it's worth and what we really do have, content-wise, wholehearted.org, there's more than I can tell you in 6 hours. There is so much heart and so much wholeness and so much wellness and so much recovery and so many tools helping people learn to help themselves. You cannot make a mistake at wholehearted.org.
Beautiful. That's a really beautiful trailer.
So Stephanie, thank you so much for being here. I'm really grateful that we're going to have this time together. Thank you for saying yes to this.
I'm super excited.
Okay, good. I like to start every session with a little bit of mindfulness. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just allowing yourself to settle in, gently closing your eyes. We begin by taking a nice deep breath together. And on the exhale, simply allowing yourself to become fully present, fully aware. We give ourselves permission to bring our full attention and intention to this very moment, opening up to the infinite possibilities of our time together, creating the intention to trust inner wisdom, knowing that it will guide us. So as we move into about 15 seconds in the silence, I invite you to check in with that inner knowing. Perhaps set an intention, ask that inner voice what wants to be revealed as we move into our session. And we simply take 15 seconds in the silence together. Okay, thank you. So this can be whatever you want. Did anything come up for you as an intention or something you wanted to talk about?
Just kind of being open and honest, and whatever comes up and not holding back.
Okay. What are you working with right now in your life in terms of your recovery, your evolution?
So I'm an adult grandchild of an alcoholic.
Okay.
On my dad's side, and it was never talked about in the family. And my dad died about 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm really starting to feel it because I'm the oldest. I'm the one that makes sure that everybody was taken care of. And just for the holidays coming up, this was the first Thanksgiving without him, and I was back east. So that was really hard. We did do, we had a wedding, which was amazing, but it's just been really hard because I miss him. I was close to him, and he was an only child, and I lived with his parents from the time I was 10 until they both died.
Wow.
So, and I was the one that kind of protected everybody from my grandfather's alcoholism, which is one of the reasons I'm in the field that I'm in, is because of him. And I was really hoping my dad and I could work more on that, but we couldn't. But he actually said to me a year before he died, I'm ready to go. His dad died at 85, my dad died at 86. So there's just a lot of me going back and playing the strong one, which everyone said I was going to have to do, and I knew I was going to have to do. And going through his study, and there was some stuff that we found out that I knew about, there were some tapes that we found that I had to help get rid of. And that was really difficult. And my sister thanked me because she's like, she couldn't do the work, but I could do the work. So it's been, the last month, it's just been a lot of emotions coming up. And usually I shove them down. And I'm not shoving them down, I'm actually feeling them. Which has been huge for me. I'm also on a weight loss journey right now. And I usually eat. And I haven't been eating. I actually just had my weigh-in yesterday, and I actually lost 4 pounds in November, which is like huge. So there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of like coming up, and I'm just feeling it instead of, because I'm really good at like compartmentalizing and pushing it down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I just need to feel it, and I just need to deal with it. And I've been talking to a lot of friends about it, and I've been talking to, professionals about it. So that's been super helpful. But it's really just feeling the feelings, which is what I tell my clients. So it's important. I have to live my truth because I can't help my clients if I'm a mess.
Right.
So it's really just feeling those feelings and not turning towards the food and I'm a huge chocolate person, so it's not turning to the chocolate, or if I am turning to the chocolate, it's allowing myself to have like 1 or 2 and then stopping, where in the past I would just have like an entire box of chocolate, so that's really what's been going on the last like month.
Wow. So if you noticed with Stephanie, she immediately went right into her emotions. And a very important key point here is it would have been really, really easy for me and maybe even tempting to pause or to stop her or to ask a question. But if you notice instead, I went about a full 3, maybe even 4 minutes before asking anything. And if you notice, I'm just simply nodding and I am aware and allowing her to share whatever she needs to share. But there's actually another point here, and that is as she was sharing, because it seemed like, it was going a lot of different places, but instead of trying to steer that, what I actually did was just held a space. And what's happening internally for me is simply reminding myself, be open, be present, allow her to go wherever she needs to go, because the key here is we don't want to consciously or unconsciously stop her process. Even if I think, oh, I wish she would have gone there, or maybe we should have talked about that emotional experience. Instead, I'm very conscious to hold space and to let her go where she wants to take it. And then when there is a point where she seems to be complete with that, then I come in and now I'm going to ask her a few questions. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a few questions about, we could talk, there's a couple different directions that we can take it, so I'll invite you to decide where. One is the idea of the strategy that was developed to compartmentalize and push down the feelings that you talked about. The other one is, what does it even mean to feel our feelings? Because, you and I are in this field where we talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, which direction would you like to go?
Let's go to the feelings.
Okay, I thought so. So let's talk about that. So these feelings are coming up. You're not doing your normal strategy.
Right.
So how has that been for you?
It's been good, actually, because I realized if I'm really looking back, I started compartmentalizing probably when I moved here to California about 2009. Okay. I got out of a really bad, really toxic relationship, and I shut down emotionally. Yeah. I was able to talk a lot about it in sessions with my clients. I did a lot of therapy around it, did some EMDR, did some other stuff, but still I wasn't feeling the feelings because I was good at, it goes back to both, I was good at compartmentalizing it. And I would bring it up when it was appropriate for me. And then, or I'm really good at like starting to feel them, and then I'll go to laughter, or I'll go to something else, or I'll go to like compartmentalizing to more of the intellect versus the feeling. Yeah. And now like when they're coming up, and I still do it, but I'm like, wait a minute, I need to feel it more. Yeah. And I need to let it out more. And one of the best things has been like driving home and just sobbing, which has been really good because I'm realizing that's also why I kept the weight on. Yeah. Because it was protecting me, and it's like, I don't need to be protected anymore, I just need to feel. Yeah. So that's why it's been super important to feel these feelings. And I talk to my clients about sitting with uncomfortable feelings. It's like, I need to be able to do what I'm telling them to do. Yeah. And I need to be able to tell them that I've done it and I've been through it and it will pass. I've never had the belief that once I start, it will never stop.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like I stop myself. So it's like, why am I stopping myself? And that I haven't figured out yet, but that's what I'm working on, is like, why am I stopping myself?
So when you say stopping yourself, what does it look like? And then maybe we
It
can
looks like
explore
what just
that.
happened 2 minutes ago. Like, I'll start to cry, and then I'll be
Yeah.
like, okay, let me cry for a little bit, and then I'll just go back to being, I don't want to say okay, but more like up here versus here.
Yeah, so more intellectual.
More intellectual, yes.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I tend to try to ask questions that don't start with why. And do you have a sense of why I would say that?
Because why can get me up here?
Right, exactly. Why is often, if I can just figure out this, where the
Right.
root of this is, then what?
I can figure it out here, and I can stop crying, and I'll be fine.
Right, so
to
it's
speak.
a more subtle way of not feeling.
Right.
So if we shift that to who, what, where, when, how, right? So, we could change that to what would it be like to really allow myself to feel?
And I think that's one of the things that I want to get back to, because I think about it as a kid. I mean, I was a super happy kid, really emotional, but always okay with being emotional. My ups and downs were not that intense, but they were good. I would cry when I needed to. I would be happy when I needed to. And I think after being hurt, it was just kind of like, I'll feel, but not all the way. And I think it needs to get back to feeling all the way, whatever that looks like for me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I've been really working on, because I thought I'd healed a lot of it, and I'm realizing I don't know if I have. I mean, I've definitely healed a lot, but I think there's still some place I need to go.
One of the things that stood out to me as I was just rewatching this session is noticing that she was talking about her strategies and intellectualizing. So clearly she's done enough work to recognize kind of where she goes in terms of her strategy, or what we might call a mechanism to stay safe. I noticed that I really wanted to explore when this originated, because she talked about it, later in life. That was the first time she started compartmentalizing. And I was really curious about where it actually began. What stood out to me in rewatching this is, even though I didn't ask her that directly and I just held a space, she actually went there herself. She started talking about early childhood experiences, which, as most of us know, that's really where most of these strategies originated. So I always want to be curious about that. But the key point here is I didn't direct that, because it's not really mine to decide where the session goes. It's really mine to be open to see where it needs to go and let her steer that, with me just gently guiding it. So through holding space and just letting her talk it out and feel it out, she actually said something about early childhood experiences. And so then we're going to see where it goes from there. And what would healed look like?
Being able to, when I feel, to feel and not stopping myself,
Yeah.
which I do. And it's also, one of my friends say, get out of the counselor mode. Like, just be the person instead of Stephanie the counselor, Stephanie the person.
Yeah.
I think that's what I've really been working on. Even with my friendships, it's like, okay, take a step back. Am I going into counselor mode with my friends? Now, if they ask me, that's one thing.
So what is counselor mode?
Counselor mode is when I give advice, when I give suggestions, when I go into that very intellectual, like, well, this is what I would suggest that you do around your relationship with your partner. This is what I would suggest you do around your drinking. And I'm like, wait a minute. If they're asking me, that's one thing, but I tend to do it just, someone said I'm innately, it's like ingrained in me that I just do it all the time without even thinking about it sometimes. And so that's what I'm trying not to do.
Yeah.
To just be a friend and be in the moment with them and be present with them.
Right.
Instead of, because if I'm present with them, I'm also feeling. If I'm in counselor mode, I'm much more intellectual again.
Well, unexpectedly, I'm going to go a little different direction with you.
Okay.
I would like to explore, is it the most effective way to be a counselor to be in the intellectual, because you equated it with advice giving, or this is what you need to do. And I'm wondering if we could explore, because Interestingly enough, what we're creating here is this series called Holding Space. And we're talking about what it means as a counselor, as a therapist, to hold space for the person we're with, rather than to try to really overly direct it.
And it's interesting because I tend to do that more with my friends. When I'm with my clients, I am holding that space all the time. It's like, what do you want? Where do you want to go with this? Because I do a lot of motivational interviewing and a lot of like just meeting them where they're at. Like I've got clients that in my mind, I should be like, well, I think they should be here. And it's like, they're not there yet. So, and I've even said to them, this is where you don't want to be correct. And they're like, oh yeah, I'm not ready yet. And I'm like, okay, let's see where you're at. So I'm better when I'm in that therapeutic role where I know I'm in that therapeutic role of holding space, but more with my friends, I tend to go even more into more, I wouldn't say maybe even a counselor, but maybe more of an advice giver than the counselor.
And how are you with yourself?
Oh. I've never thought about that.
So this is a really interesting moment in our session. If you notice, it went in a completely different direction than what I expected. And again, I'm going to keep bringing the same point. If I had been overly engaged in steering the session, we would have missed the opportunity where she went about the role of the counselor. I noticed in rewatching it that I was definitely having a perspective about that. And when I notice I'm having a perspective, I invite myself to pull back and open up to see where the client wants to take it. And isn't it interesting where it just went when I asked the question, how are you with yourself? Because we actually started with, what does it mean to be a counselor? So many of us who are clinicians, counselors, coaches, therapists, maybe have bought into kind of an unconscious belief or a bias that the role of the counselor is to offer advice or to really steer the session. And what I was hearing was that we were starting to explore some of that. And as she identified that she was in counselor mode, I became curious about what it means to internalize that. In other words, is she wanting to offer advice to herself? So after that pause, I just asked the question, how are you with yourself? And if you notice, what happened was, I've never thought of that. So it was a really pivotal moment in the session because I was open and simply asked the question. And she brought up motivational interviewing, so I want to touch on that for a second as well. Motivational interviewing is really powerful because we shift from offering advice to asking questions. But in conscious recovery, we're taking motivational interviewing a little bit deeper. And that is, are we asking questions that are meant to steer the session, which I often see in motivational interviewing? Or can I really just be open and hold a space? And before I ask a question, really let the client steer where it needs to go. And then the question is really more intuitive. In other words, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'm going to get her to explore how she is with herself. Because there was that pause, that question came up in a really different way. And then when I asked it, as you saw, there was a really powerful pivot that happened. So let's pause for a moment if you're willing.
Yeah.
And even more than thinking about it, just we'll take a few moments to be with that as an idea. How am I with myself? Just notice what emerges.
I tend to be critical
Yeah.
around my body.
Right.
I tend to be very uncritical around my intellect. I've used my intellect my entire life as a really shining star, so to speak, and kind of like I'm the closest. My dad had a PhD in religion from the University of Chicago. He graduated magna cum laude from Yale and Brown. Super smart.
Yeah.
And I've always been like, I'm the smartest of my family. I'm the closest one to him that way. So I've used that as a defense mechanism. But in other ways, it's kind of, and I know one of the things that I've worked on for years is the kind of like, I'm deserving, but I'm not deserving. So I've been working on like, no, I'm deserving of love. I'm deserving of having a partner. I'm deserving of going further in my career. I'm deserving of having a private practice, because for a long time it was like, well, I'm a fake. I'm not. So those critical voices is what I've been working on for the last 10 years to get rid of them, but they still creep in.
So I have a profound idea for you.
Oh, lovely.
It's actually a question.
Okay.
What if the goal isn't to get rid of the critical voices? Mm-hmm. And do you know why I might be asking that? Or what's the purpose of that question?
Because it's kind of that addict all or nothing thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's interesting, right? Because if addiction or using something, whether that's food, sex, shopping, gambling, drugs, alcohol, if we're using something, we're often using something to try to change an experience, right?
Yep.
So we could call it numbing or avoiding, or as you said, push down. You've used the term push down a couple of times. I don't call them defense mechanisms or coping mechanisms. I call them brilliant strategies.
Yes.
Right. So in your case, your brilliance is your brilliant strategy. Right. So rather than framing it as something that we need to get rid of, because that's at the root of the why question.
Right.
But it's also at the root possibly of like, let me get rid of these critical voices. That might be under the addictive umbrella. So what would be different than getting rid of them?
Embracing them and changing them. I don't know to what, but I'm definitely thinking like embracing them and changing them and just kind of accepting them and maybe bringing them along with me and kind of like thanking them for what they brought me, but that they're not serving me anymore.
Yeah. You said something that I think is really powerful. You said thanking them. And I really love that. Thank you, voice. I know you're trying to, whatever that is.
Right.
And then recognizing that it may not be the truth.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think about it, you know, I tell my clients all the time, like, write a letter to your substance of choice, breaking up with them.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I need to do that with my own thinking and my own thought patterns around, thank you for helping me, but you're not helping me anymore.
Yeah. And maybe it's thank you, and first list all the ways it really has helped you. So let's explore that. What do you want to call it? The critical voice?
The critical voice.
Okay. So how has the critical voice served you?
The critical voice has actually served me because it actually helps me move around a lot. Like I was able to move out here when I was 33 knowing nobody because there was that critical voice was like, you're not going to be able to do it. And it was kind of like, I can do this. But the critical voice has also really helped me be compassionate and go into kind of helping people. Because I've always been super, like my friends would come to me when I was 10 and ask me about relationships. I'm like, I don't have one. But they always came to me. So there was, even though there was that critical voice, there was that other side of it where it's like, you can do this. How else does it help me? It's kept me protected, I think, from getting involved in some really bad relationships. Or because I am so loyal and so compassionate, I've stayed in relationships too long, but I've also recognized when it's time to like go and then let go and really shut the door. So I think those are some ways that they've really helped me. I love food. So even though there's that critical voice, it's like I am still at the point where I can enjoy a really good meal and not necessarily always feel guilty about it. So it's like if I'm gonna go out and have like a huge fondue lobster dinner, I'm like, I'm gonna do it and it's okay. Even though there is that critical voice that's like, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing this. And I'm like, it's okay every once in a while to do it.
And in what ways has it not served you?
It's definitely kept me protected, so I haven't taken some risks with both my job and with some boyfriends that I wanted to date. It's kept me scared. It's kept me actually invested in some friendships for too long because I kept giving them chance after chance after chance. It hasn't served me in that I tended to not stand up for myself at times. And there was that belief that, well, you'll never find somebody because you're not worthy. It's kept me protected by putting the weight on, because there's that part of me that just says, fuck it, I'll just sit on the couch and watch TV, because that's really safe.
Yeah.
You know, Prince Charming's not coming to my door.
Right.
But sitting on the couch is super safe, and numbing out with watching TV or just having popcorn is super safe. So that's how it hasn't served me.
Yeah. What are you noticing right now?
That I've actually come a lot further than I thought. But by talking about some of this, because I've recently gotten rid of some people that were really toxic in my life. I've been on a weight loss journey where I've lost some weight, and I've actually started, but I'm taking them along with me, and it's almost like I'm hearing them, but I'm talking back and saying, like, it's almost like you said, I'm like, thank you for being here, but I don't have to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things I like to do with it is, one, like you said, thank you for sharing.
Right.
Right. But not in a dismissive, like,
Right.
you can go away now. But I know you're really trying to help me.
Right.
And I also know, the second thing is, I also know that it's not the truth.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. As I'm talking about it, I'm like, wait a minute, I've done a lot of these things, and I've done a lot of work around not, I don't want to say not listen, but kind of like you said, like, thank them, but realize it's not necessarily the truth.
Yeah. So I want to offer you a couple of things that just emerged in the session and offer you a tool. I have this 4-step process, or these 4 different questions that I ask someone when they start to talk about either what they call defense strategies, defense mechanisms, or what at Conscious Recovery we call brilliant strategies. In that conversation, and if you notice, it was for her the critical voice, I start with gratitude. So we start by sending gratitude to the critical voice. And then I ask the question, how has that served you? Because I often hear people say, in what way is it not working? So instead of that, I start with, in what ways is it serving you? In what ways is it working in your life? The key here, though, is for me to actually really listen and hold the space. After they say how it has served, I move into, in what ways is it not serving you? The key here is to hold the same energy as they're sharing both of them. Because again, we don't want to go into good, bad, right, wrong, but we want to be curious, open, and present. Because the key here is not for me to direct it or for me to think she needs to get this, but for her to have the process, and then for her to say, oh, it really has served me. And in other ways, it isn't serving me. And then I usually ask the 4th time, the 4th piece is, what do you really want? In this case, I asked, what are you experiencing? Because I noticed that there had been a real energetic shift. And throughout the session, I will often pause and say, what are you experiencing? As a matter of fact, sometimes I will let the client know before the session starts. One thing that I might do throughout the session is pause and ask you what you're noticing. And if you saw, that's something I did with Stephanie in this session as well. Would you be willing for a few moments to check in and just notice what you're feeling?
Yeah.
Right, because what did you notice about the last little bit?
I'm much happier at this moment. Yeah. I'm much calmer. I feel much stronger. And I almost want to say powerful in a really positive way, not in a condescending, but kind of like, wow, you've done some work that's been really difficult, but you've done it. And I didn't even realize how far I've come.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. So let's shift for a moment and see if we can just be present with what you're experiencing, either emotionally or in your body, that's not a thought. Just see if you can check in and see what you notice.
The first thing that I noticed is, like, right here is much calmer.
Okay.
When we first started, it was like all jumbly, and I was really teary, and I was kind of shaky, and I'm just like really present in my body right here, which I'm not usually present, which is an interesting thing. I'm usually like here or here, but like right here just feels really grounded.
What do you think created that?
Just accepting things where they are and kind of changing the way I've been thinking about things. Because it's funny because I have a weight loss coach, and we were just talking about perfectionism yesterday and how I've always had an idea of what perfectionism looks like, and I'm realizing I'm very perfectionistic in certain ways, but not the way that I thought about perfectionism. So I'm really working on not being perfectionistic. And I think even the thought process I've been having were very perfectionistic thinking. And so now that that's kind of shifting, I'm like, oh, like you said, I can thank them, but they don't have to come in and they're actually not the truth.
Another tool is just questioning them.
Right.
Yeah.
Or like, what are you trying to tell me? Or because there are times when I think they do keep me safe from certain things. You know, like I've had a horrible work environment the last year, and I think some of that critical thinking has actually helped me get past this horrible work environment to continue to just be like, okay, it's not about them, it's about the students. So that's been really helpful because my critical voice is like, just quit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I don't have to quit. But they've kept me safe.
Yeah. So tell me about that. That's interesting.
So
How have they kept you safe?
They've kept me safe because I didn't make a really emotional decision emotionally, which would have been just to quit.
Yeah.
Because I've been at my job for 20 years and I love my job. And I've loved my former supervisors because they totally got me. They understood what I did. They really valued me. Being the only counselor at UC Davis for 41,000 students. And now I have a supervisor that has an MBA and a nursing degree and is all about the numbers and doesn't care. And when I even went to her and said, I put 10 people into treatment last year, doesn't that matter? And her comment was no. It was like, it really hurt. And I actually cried in her office, and I still get upset about it. And I wanted to walk out and just be like, and all I was asking was to keep my office, not even like anything different, but they put me in this very small office, and I said, I have got smoking cessation clients, I don't have enough circulation, I'm gonna start getting headaches, it didn't matter. So the little girl in me wanted to like run away and take my toys and but and the critical voice was like, don't make an emotional decision emotionally. So I didn't, and I'm still there, and I'm not going to leave at least for 2 years. But there's still that part of me that's like, well, if you keep pissing me off, I'm going to do it and show them because they've made me feel horrible. But it's like, I don't have to make them feel horrible. So that critical voice is kind of like,
What do you think that emotion was about a moment ago?
I love my job and I love my students. And I just don't feel validated anymore. Yeah. I don't feel respected. My seniority means nothing. And I have given up relationships over this job. I've given up friendships over this job. It's defined me. And it just feels really shitty that I'm saving lives. And not that some of the other counselors aren't saving lives, but it's like, I'm dealing with addiction, as you know, this is like, I'm putting people into treatment, I'm helping possibly save their lives, and to be told putting 10 people in treatment doesn't matter. It's just kind of like, that's my life's work. This is my purpose. Yeah. And it just feels like you don't care. All you care about is the numbers. You say you care about the students, but they don't. And that's really hard because my past supervisors did care about the students. And they did care about saving lives. And every decision they made, we may not have liked it, but it was all about the students. And this feels all about the numbers. And that just hurts. Because I care about my kids.
Yeah. Is that a familiar, because I'm really struck by the possible parallel, and I want to explore it with you, the possible parallel of how we started this session, which was being the oldest child and having to be the strong one. And I'm curious if there is some kind of relationship between this in terms of the emotion around having someone come in and say some version of, it doesn't matter.
I don't know. I'd never thought of that. To me, it feels more like I'm expendable, which I mean, I know I'm expendable, but actually hearing it is kind of like, ouch.
Okay, this is a really interesting moment in this session, and I want to just call myself out because if you notice, I kind of did try to direct her in one direction. I had this hypothesis that there might have been a connection to what she was saying, and so I asked a question, and honestly, it was a little bit leading. And if you noticed, she paused, and then she said, nope, that's not it, it's this. Now, why is it important for me to make comments at this moment? It's okay if we do that. It was okay that I did that. The more important piece, though, is recognizing I could see that that wasn't landing for her. So I held a space, and then she said, no, what it really is this. So I'll be really curious now to see where the session goes from here.
And I've asked for the last 5 years to have another counselor be hired, and we were 6 counselors down. And when I asked again, it was like, nope, we're not hiring a substance abuse counselor. We're hiring this, and this. So again, it's like, don't you feel like it matters? And I think, yeah, it doesn't matter to them. So I think substance abuse doesn't matter to them.
Well, and that's what I'm pointing to. I'm wondering if that touches something within you about your own worth and how you matter.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Because I now know I matter, but it feels like they don't know I matter.
Right.
So yeah.
Is it touching something within you then, or is it?
Yeah, it feels like I don't matter.
Yeah.
And the work I do doesn't matter, where I know the work I do matters. And it's interesting 'cause line staff get it, and they're like, oh my God, we love the work you, thank God you're here. There are some counselors that are completely terrified of substance abuse. They won't even touch it, so they automatically send them to me. Because like, we don't know what to do when someone talks about substances. Some of them don't even know what the substances are. I had someone come in my office and go, is methamphetamine a depressant? And I'm like, no. You know, so I'm doing some education with my staff, so they get it, but it's like the higher ups that just don't get it. And that's actually scary to me, that they don't understand that this is only going to get worse, in my opinion, with marijuana being legalized now, with the Adderall and the Xanax use that's skyrocketing, and that I'm the only one. And it's like, and I'm 20 years in, so I'm retiring in 2 years no matter what. And then it's kind of like, what happens? And there's that part of me, the rebellious side of me, that wants to be like, I don't care. But that's not who I am at my core.
Yeah. So let's go back to what it might be touching with the I don't matter. Mm-hmm. When did that originate in your life?
That I've tried to figure out for 30 years. I don't know when. It was really young.
Okay.
I think if I look back at all my counseling and all my stuff, it was, and it's totally irrational, but it was when I was 3. Mm-hmm. My sister was brought home from the hospital, and I was reading her a book, and my mom's like, Steph, she can't understand you. She's 3 days old. But in my mind, it was like, well, if she really loved me and if I really mattered, she would look at me and understand me. She's 3 days old. But in my little 3-year-old brain, it was that I didn't matter.
Right.
So that's what I've been working on for years, is that I do matter.
Yeah. Okay, now we're at something really important. This is a pivotal moment, because if you noticed, she was talking a lot about the strategy, and then I paused and I said, where did this originate? Or do you have an idea of where this originated? A few things transpired. One, I've been trying to figure that out for 30 years. Figure it out is intellectual, and she has identified that one of her primary strategies is intellectualizing. So I'm taking note of that. And then what happened next is she said, well, this is irrational, but when I was 3. Now, this is really, really important, because she's identifying that it's irrational, which lets me know that she's actually going to move out of the intellectual strategy, and we're probably going to get to something that's really, really important. And then she went all the way back to 3 years old. This is absolutely vital, because what we're looking at is where these strategies and these core wounds developed, and we want to be curious about that much more than the strategy. because we could spend another 20 minutes in the session talking about the intellectualizing, talking about her exploration of that. But what happened instead is she was able to say, well, there's this thing that happened when I was 3. And again, the whole point here is holding the space, because I would have never known that something happened at 3, but she knew that on some level. The key to a conscious recovery session is to continue to hold space. And now she's getting down to something that in her own words, she said, I've been trying to get to this for 30 years. So I'm really grateful that we're getting to this. And then it's going to be what comes next is an inner child process, a self-parenting process. So I'm really, really grateful that this transpired so that we can explore that now. So here's the thing that I would like to explore for a few minutes. That, as you said, at 3, we don't have the cognitive ability to understand what's happening. So we end up making these big life decisions about ourselves. So when you say, I've been working on it, we could explore that. But I would rather explore, if you are willing, what did that actually feel like at 3? Are you in touch with that?
Trying to remember. I could tell you exactly where I was. I could tell you what I was doing.
Okay, well, let's start there.
So my sister was sitting, my mom had brought her home. This was Missouri, and we have stairs, and so she put my sister in the little car seat on the stairs. I'm sitting on the stairs. I'm reading her this book. I don't remember the book, but I remember it may have even been The Little Elephant, but I was reading her this book. And of course, she couldn't even look at me because she's 3 days old, but in my mind, I'm like, well, you should be looking at me, and you should be understanding me. And my mom came up, and she actually was kind of laughing, and she's like, Steph, she's 3 days old. She doesn't understand. And my 3-year-old brain was like, but she should understand. And I remember getting really, not mad, but like frustrated that it's like, why doesn't she understand? And why won't she just look at me? And why can't she just see me? So that's what I remember. And my mom's like, but she's 3 days old. She can't. And I just kept like saying, well, why can't she? Why can't? That's what I remember, really. And then part of me is like, well, then I must not matter.
Yeah. It's a pretty big decision for a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So how do we heal that?
Well, that's what I've been working on. I did a lot of EMDR around it, and I realized that was attributed. And I've even done a lot of work on myself, saying when those little thoughts come in, saying, take a step back, take some breaths, you do matter. So I think that's the big thing that I've done a lot of work. But it was still so fresh that it just happened like 2 months ago when they were like, no, we're changing your office. And then it turns out there were 5 other people that they did this to. So that helped as well, that it wasn't just me. So I wasn't like singled out. There was a bunch of people whose offices they changed, and none of us were happy about it. So I was like, okay, it's not like pointing the finger at me, but I'm the one that does have the most seniority. And part of it is realizing, like, is it really about the seniority that's bothering you, or is it about the fact that you don't matter? And it was like the fact that I felt like I didn't matter. So that's the thing that I had to get in touch with, was that, no, I do matter.
Yeah. And I think being present with knowing where that originated, that it's not about what's happening as much as it is about what it's touching.
Right.
What I want to be curious about, though, is how we are present with the 3-year-old part of ourselves. Because I think it is obviously true that you matter.
Right.
And does the 3-year-old understand that?
The 3-year-old is getting more and more. I think there's a part of the 3-year-old that still doesn't get it, because I've talked with my 3-year-old a lot. but she's getting better at understanding.
What do you say with her? What do you talk with her
I just
about?
tell her about how, it's kind of like what my mom said, but I think part of it was also the way my mom did it, which was just be like, oh, it's fine. My mom is very passive aggressive. And my mom is an amazingly wonderful woman, but who's very passive aggressive. And so she just kind of did it in a flip way that as a 3-year-old I wouldn't get. So what I've gone back to and been like, it's okay. Look at the fact that your sister, because my sister actually looked at me, but she didn't actually understand. So it was kind of like, look, she's looking at you, but think about when you were a baby. And I've actually done some regression work where I was able to remember what it was like to be a little baby and be like, yeah, I don't remember, so why would my sister? So that's been really helpful. And then just talking with my sister about, you do matter. You're going to grow up and really matter to a lot of people. And that's been really helpful and just kind of be like, it's okay.
So this part of the session is fascinating to me because it's clear that she has done a lot of work. She's done a lot of work on her inner child. She's done a lot of work on these memories and the impact that they've had. But what I'm really noticing right now in watching this session is that what she's doing with her child is almost negotiating with the 3-year-old and almost from an intellectual place trying to reason with the 3-year-old. What we're going to be doing next is moving into my approach or conscious recovery's approach to this self-parenting or inner child work, because the key point here is the 3-year-old didn't have the intellectual ability to understand what was happening. So the last thing we want to do is try to come in and expect the 3-year-old to be an adult. So what we're going to be doing next is helping her get back to the experience that she had at 3. And you're going to see how I do the inner child process, where we start to affirm what the child is feeling and start to heal some of that, not from the intellect, but more from the emotional center.
I think saying it's okay has been really helpful.
Yeah. And I wonder if you've asked her what she's experiencing.
Ooh, I have not.
Because the work that I see happening with our inner child is really powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it is some version of everything's going to be okay. And what I really want to invite is to find out where she's at, what she's experiencing, and let her know that it's okay for her to feel that way.
Right.
And that she's safe to have that. Because a lot of times we end up trying to talk our little child out of what they experienced. Does that resonate for you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was like, oh, yeah, I've been trying to say, it's fine, it's going to be great, it's going to be fine, but I haven't really talked to her about, like, it's okay to be in this safe space and feel what you're feeling, and you're still, yeah.
Yeah, the 3 phrases I use are, it's okay for you to feel that way, you're safe in this moment, and I'm here for you. To try to start having that relationship with her, because is that what you got when you were 3? That it's okay for you to feel?
No.
And that it's safe?
No.
Yeah.
It was just like, oh, she's not going to understand you. But it wasn't like, it's okay that you're really frustrated, and it's okay that you're not understanding why she doesn't get it. It's like, just, it's fine. And literally it was like, it's fine. And I remember my mom doing that.
Yeah. Would you like to do a brief process around that?
Sure.
Okay. So what we're going to do, the whole thing is going to be about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So for a moment, we just start with closing our eyes, spending a couple of moments focusing on our breath and just allowing ourselves to settle in. Finding that place within ourselves that is calm and still, that place of inner silence. We're going to take just a few moments in this silence, and then I'll walk us through the process. So I want you now to go back to that memory. Remember sitting there on the stairs, reading the book. And for a moment, embody your 3-year-old self. And just imagine what you were experiencing. What are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Just noticing that for a few moments. And what we're going to do now is have you, as the adult, have a conversation with her. And if you are willing, please do it out loud. So starting with asking your 3-year-old self very simply, what are you feeling? What are you experiencing?
So, what are you feeling? What are you experiencing?
And just embodying your 3-year-old self again and answer that question.
I'm excited. I'm frustrated. I'm confused.
Okay. So now the adult self, let the child self know that it's okay to be excited and frustrated and confused.
It's totally okay to be excited and frustrated and confused.
And you're safe in this moment. It's okay. You're safe to feel all that.
You're okay in this moment. You're totally safe to feel this in this moment.
Mm-hmm. And I'm here for you.
And I'm here for you.
Now go back to your 3-year-old self. Embody yourself as the 3-year-old again. Just noticing now what you're experiencing. And have your adult self ask her again, what are you feeling? What are you experiencing?
So what are you feeling and what are you experiencing?
And then have the 3-year-old answer that.
I'm still feeling everything, but I feel safe doing it.
Okay. So say to her now, it's okay for you to still feel everything, and it's okay for you to feel safe doing it.
It's okay for you to feel everything, and it's okay for you to feel safe feeling everything and doing it.
And you are safe in this moment.
You are safe in this moment.
And I'm here for you.
And I'm here for you.
Yeah, going back to the 3-year-old self. Now what is she experiencing? Checking in with that. And then one last time, have your adult self ask her what she's feeling.
So what are you feeling? Love. I feel love and safe.
Okay. Let her know it's okay to feel love.
It's okay to feel love.
And it's okay to feel safe.
And it's okay to feel safe.
Because you are safe in this moment.
Because you are safe in this moment.
And I'm here for you.
And I'm here for you.
So take a few moments now. You might imagine sitting there next to her on the stairs or being with her. You might imagine holding her, picking her up and holding her. Just taking a few moments here, non-verbally, to connect with her. We'll just take a few moments in the silence. During that silence, just imagine the love and the connection that you're feeling for each other, your adult self and your child self. And then check in with her and see if it's okay if you come back to this time and space. See if she's okay with that.
She's okay with that.
And let her know that you're doing everything you need to do to learn how to take care of her even better than you did before. And then as you feel ready, let her know you're coming back to this time and space. Start to bring your awareness back into the room. And then as it feels right for you, you can gently open your eyes.
Wow.
Okay, what was that like for you?
That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was really, really powerful. It feels completely safe and completely pure.
Yeah. What are you noticing now?
I'm happy. These are like happy tears.
Yeah. So this is a practice that actually is really simple. If you can just remember the 3 phrases. It's okay to feel that way. You're safe now. I'm here for you. And just checking in. So it can be a couple of different ways that I use it. One is a formal practice, you know, a few times a week, sitting down, thinking of a situation from the past that was painful and walking through the process. More often for me, or I guess I should say, in addition to that, if I notice myself getting activated in some way, or like, you know, something at work that happens or something in a relationship, to really notice what's happening internally. And it becomes such a natural way of being that we don't even necessarily have to have the dialogue, but always starting with, it's okay to feel this way. That alone is life-changing.
Yeah. Because I do think there's a lot that's like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I shouldn't. And it's like, no, I can feel. It's okay.
So you can see that this self-parenting process is really powerful. And in this particular case with Stephanie, she acknowledged or identified that she's often in her mind. And if you remember going back to the beginning of the session, she said, I want to learn how to be more in my feelings. She even said, I tell my clients to feel their feelings, but I'm curious, do I really feel mine? So the whole arc of the session is really about gently creating a space for her to get in touch with the emotions. If you also noticed, at the end of the inner child process, I paused and I asked her, what was that like for you? And then there were a few moments where we just sat in the silence. This is really key. And then I let her share what that experience was like. She said she felt happier, she felt lighter. And then what I did, and this is what I think is important, is you want to give a little bit of practicality. I said, you know, you can use this when you feel activated. You can use this in a process, a meditation process. Want to give them some practical ways that they can actually apply this because, you know, she had this really powerful experience. But it's also important when she walks away that she doesn't just have, wow, that was really cool. We want to let her mind understand this is something I can use again and something that I can practice. So with you, you are probably going to see this client again. So I would probably start the next session with asking her or him, do you remember that self-parenting process? Is it something that you've been able to apply? And then you might go back through that process again, because I do think that it's important that they have something to take with them that's also a tangible tool that they can use. So the session is wrapping up. Let's see how it closes. So believe it or not, we only have a couple minutes left.
Okay.
I'm wondering, what is your takeaway from our time together? Let's start with that.
This was really, really impactful because, again, it goes back to like I've done work, but there was stuff that I didn't realize, and I loved just the 3-year-old, what we just did. That was super impactful. And just, again, realizing, again, that it's okay to feel. And it's okay to be where I'm at, and there's nothing wrong with it, and to not stop it and just let it flow, because it will stop on its own when it's supposed to, instead of like going into this, I gotta stop. It's like, no, just let it flow.
Yeah, beautiful. And interestingly enough, 3 is the age when we're usually pretty natural at letting it come and go.
Right.
But that's also the age a lot of us start learning how to like stuff down the feelings.
Right, which is exactly when I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for your vulnerability and your willingness to be here fully in the room and let us really see you. I feel very, very honored to have witnessed what just transpired.
Well, I want to thank you, because this was like, wow. And I didn't know what to expect, so this has been great.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're
Thank you so much. So I generally like to close a session with just a little bit of kind of a closure, put a little bow on it. I don't like to leave clients when they're super open emotionally. I usually ask the question, what was your takeaway, or what were your takeaways? Because honestly, what that does is it allows them to shift out of the emotional experience and then have a little intellectual understanding, and that can often help them feel a little uplifted as they walk out of the room. Usually they'll be able to reflect on what was powerful for them, which also helps them to know that they can take that out now and again, have a tool to use. One thing I want to say, it's coincidental that in all the sessions that you are going to see in this training, in this course, I used that inner child, that self-parenting exercise. That was not planned. And I don't want you to think in any way that it's important that that happen in every session. As a matter of fact, it's not something I use too often. But if you notice with Stephanie, she was leading there. It was going there over and over and over again. So it felt like it's something that I really wanted to explore. It is a really, really powerful tool, and I have witnessed people having profound shifts. So it's definitely something that I encourage you to try. Just wanted to let you know, it's not that you want to try to make that happen, but it certainly showed up in all three of these sessions. So I kind of organically followed the energy of that.
Gosh, you golly willikers. For anybody who's still watching, I hope you enjoyed that. Isn't TJ wonderful? And I got to say, it's fun because so many of his practices are very similar to what we do in Love Coach Academy. We very much to support people's adult, most centered self or wisest self, giving the love and the support to any inner child self that's wanting that love, because our inner child gets attached to looking outside of ourselves for it. And that doesn't mean we can't have wonderful relationships and receive love from others, but learning how to give it to ourselves is huge. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you are still there, whoever might be there, and hope to see you all. Oh, it looks like a few people are still there. Jerry is still there, and Mark. Hey, thank you. Love you guys. And it's really beautiful to see you all still there. So thank you. Tomorrow night, Saturday Night Alive for the Global Peace Tribe. Hope to see you then. Take care.